Greetings, it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome once more into the fray. We're entering into the world of darkness once more, diving deep into the nightmares in between the shadows may haunt you. Yes, diving deep again. Today, I'm bringing you yet another bit from the Werewolf The Apocalypse game, another changing breed. One of the other beings you could play that is not a werewolf, but a way connected to them. And this one, perhaps more than any other, is one of the most alien. We'll talk about it, though. Let's dive in here. For yes, today I am talking about the Ananasi, or as they call themselves, Damhan, the werespiders. So let's begin talking about some books that I can suggest if you want to read up on them yourself. Primary book I would indeed recommend is, of course, the old Ananasi Changing Breed book. This is the core book that has a lot of the information I'm going to review. This is the best book to start your adventures and looking into things. If I would suggest one book, this is the one. There are some other books that do have some materials we can talk about. The Player's Guide to Changing Breeds, of course, is a classic one, providing a lot of basic information on many different of the other changing breeds other than, werewolves. It's a good one to check out. And of course, the original Player's Guide for Werewolf introduced a lot of these, so if you were looking for a player's guide, we'll have information on these too. That's usually the second book after the core books for most of the werewolf editions, and similar in vampire and stuff like that. So, here's Ananasi symbol here. Let's talk about them a little bit. So, they consider themselves children of Queen Ananasa, which Queen Ananasa, if you're unaware, is a Celestine, another very powerful spirit, very similar to a lot of the other spirits that are out there. We've talked about them, things like the Triad or spirits and stuff like that. She is descended or created by the Weaver, one of the Triad. If you've missed any of my other werewolf stuff, I've talked about the Triad before being an important entire idealism, where the worm and its forces have kind of gone rogue, and that's where one of the entire, plot lines of Werewolf The Apocalypse is. Ananasa, her goal is to restore balance to the Triad. She doesn't want to overcome the worm, she doesn't want to overcome the wild, the Weaver. Though the Weaver created her, the thing is, she wants balance again. And the Weaver created her before the Severing, the big event that kind of drove things a little crazy, the madness of the Weaver and stuff like that, and shaped the current world. Ananasi was said to have created a lot of different insects and creatures and stuff like that, but the Ananasi are the direct followers of her, the direct children of her that are the ones that we refer to when we talk about this here. These are the ones that are going to be most important. So she has a bigger role. Knowing about her would be great for understanding the Ananasi's connection with her. Anyway, so, they are forces of the Weaver, more than any of the other ones, and keeping balance of the Triad, as I said, that's Queen Ananasa's goal, so they follow that goal. That is the goal of the Ananasi, balance in the world. Ananasa's will is their law, she's their main patron, and a totem for them. Those are the main totem is too. Though there are some traitor groups, like the Kumo and Kumatai, who've moved away from Ananasa. We'll talk about them before the end of today, though. So, they have the gift of the spider. in every form other than hominid. The human form, they have multiple eyes, limbs, they can exude pheromones to attract mates. Many of them possess poison glands. Venom, though, is connected with the species of spider they resemble. And they also can spin webs in pithis form, which we'll talk about, which are very strong. Switch over there. The queen themselves, kind of a representation of her. So, the Ananasi have no connection to Luna. This is one of those major things. No connection to this Luna spirit. So, as it goes, they're one of the very few Fera, changing breeds, as they would call them, that do not have rage and don't frenzy. Not at all. But, similar to their spider kin, they can draw on sustenance and supernatural powers from bodily fluids of a creature. In particular, blood of humans and animals. They can expend this to heal wounds on themselves, grant them supernatural quickness, change forms, webs, use some of their gifts. This is very similar to a vampire. Now, they don't regenerate like many other Fera. They heal like a human, unless they use the blood to heal themselves. And very similar, they don't have immunity to disease like Garu and many other Fera possess, but they can purge it using blood. So, they have a blood pool. It's very close, in a way, to vampires. And we'll talk about this at the end. I want to talk about some of the things. It's like, they originally had a little bit more of this similarity to vampires that the editions have walked them away from more, though they have similar systems in having a collection of blood that they've drained away they can use for supernatural powers. That is the main connections. So, the Damhan do not step sideways in the Umbra. Instead, they change into their crawlerling form, which we'll talk about in a minute here, and then crawl through the strands of the web, which they see as the gauntlet. They're better in areas of weaver influence than a lot of other creatures because they're connected to it, having difficulties in wild or worm-placed ones. They are very alien in comparison to all the other changing breeds because they're insect-based. But they do consider the other Fera, who they refer to as Ovid, beneath their notice, too. Spiders are much more ancient, old, creatures with history, much more than a lot of other land-based creatures and a lot of the other Fera and their connections. So they look down on them because of that. So they aren't technically a child of Gaia. That's another thing that you can talk about. So they don't have a vulnerability or allergy to silver or any other substance as their group. So, yeah, like Mokale have gold as primary thing, others have silver, there's other ones that have various other weaknesses. They don't have one. And again, that reinforces their superiority that they have in their mindset. You know, hey, we're superior to you, we have no weaknesses. Let's talk about their forms here. Because they have, of course, 4 main forms. Well, 5 main forms I should talk about. Homid, human form. You're mostly human, but there are little things about you that are very alien, unusual. There's still a little hint of that spider pushing through. It's definitely there. Then, of course, we have what's best described as the war form, kind of like the Krynos form of them, the Lilian. The Lilian forms are different for each one of the Ananasi. It's a hybrid spider-human. Organs are mixed. They have ichor for blood. And some have multiple legs, other have multiple arms, some have both. Usually they at least have... and also the number of limbs can vary. Some have 6, some have 8, some have 10. Females are generally larger and more imposing than males, who tend to be a little bit more nimble. The form is kind of mutable to a degree. Some are more spider monsters, which like huge spiders with twisted human features, human arms, human head. Some are like a humanoid spider kind of things, extra arms, extra legs. The spider centaur, very similar to the Dungeons & Dragons Drider, is some that is assumed. So it's also the same with like skin variation. There are so many variations in the Lillian form. It's crazy, and it is unique to each of their own. Even if they look completely human on upper body, they still have fangs of some kind. They still have their poison. And usually at least have 2 limbs that are more claw-like. This is the form that would speak human and their own language, as you would call it. But you'll have guttural, hissing kind of voice to your human speech. And this happens even if you have a complete human head, or very spider-like heads. So, this is a very different, but you have fangs, claws. Your bite's going to be a little weaker, and venom a little bit more diluted in comparison to some other forms, which we'll talk about. But you can't create webs, though. At this point in time. Unless you produce a form that has spinnerets, or use a gift. Anyway. There's also, then, of course, Pithis form, which we lead to now, which is basically a gigantic spider. It's at least half as heavy as the werespiders' human form. It's just a big old goddamn spider. Giant monster spider. Then we have the crawlerling. It's spider form. What's unique to the Ananasi is they don't transform into a single spider, but a swarm of hundreds and hundreds of spiders. It's very difficult to kill them in their crawlerling form. You can do some damage to them if you would kill a bunch of these. Well, it can do damage to them. It can cause them to lose memories, skills, things like that, damage them, lose mass in other forms. Only the language of the Ananasi can be communicated during the crawlerling form, which they can do, and if you would be able to understand it, it's like a chorus. But the thing is, they can use one spider or many, so like they can do one that's doing the speaking or many that are doing the speaking. It is a delirium effect to see one breaking up and reassembling, to say the least. And each time they shift these forms, they kind of determine leaders, where memories are kept, things like that. Each leader would have a set of the memories. Usually they have a number of these and kind of things, and the rest are kind of more drones. If an arachnid Ananasi falls unconscious, they automatically assume this form, with any usual measures or usual setting of that kind of thing. It's also possible for them to partially transform into crawlerling. Yeah, it's unsettling for even supernatural creatures to see that. Just like someone like their arm just transforming into spiders that are the rough same mass of an arm. It's just kinda gross. So yeah. But yes, it is hard to kill them because you're getting rid of all of them and kind of stuff like that. A crawlerling that's reduced to just a few spiders have an option. And this is one I wanted to mention too. To eat their way into the brain of a living, preferably unconscious humor, eat the body from the inside, and they will assume the form of the human they ate as a new homid form. Even have the memories of those that they ate. Though kind of muted and not quite right. You lose a permanent dot of gnosis. And you have to have your Queen Ananasa's blessing to do that. It's a thing. Yeah. It is a... They are unique. Now, there is a near-human form, the Aranid, but it's not normally one an Ananasi would have. There's a gift, the man-spider form, a rank 2 one, a kind of glabro-like form that is between Homid and Lillian. It does exist. Let's talk a little about venom and webs and stuff like that, because we should talk about them, because it's an important part of being a spider. So, your current form technically does not affect the venom potency. If you're in Pithis form, your current form does affect your venom potency. Pithis form produces full-strength venom. In Lillian and Hominid, poison is diluted. Guess what? In Hominid form, you have some venom. And the bite of a single crawlerling spider is weak, but a lot of them could do a lot, you know. Also, your spider species makes a difference, too. Venom always deals aggravated damage that can only be healed through medical or magical means. And left unattended, the damage will never heal. Even if the spider species they emulate does not have any kind of venom, Ananasi possess venom glands and deliver a bite. It's just potency will change. So you could be a spider that normally isn't very dangerous with that kind of thing. You'll still be dangerous as an Ananasi. You're always going to have fangs present in all forms to allow you to bite a venom. If you're in Hominid form, if you have some nice pointy teeth, very vampiric. Hey, remember I mentioned vampires again? It's one of those things that just shows up. Now, in Pithis form, you can spin webs. They're almost as strong as seal, flexible as natural spider webs. They take 4 levels of damage before they break. It takes a point of blood to create web long enough to block an industrial-sized doorway, fill a small closet, or ensnare a human, a large human, or a Krynos garret. In crawlerling form, you spin webs with the strength of ordinary spider webs and doesn't require blood. So, pretty simple there. Hey, we've learned about their webs and stuff. Let's do this one. It's a little better for that image there. Let me switch back. So, one thing about Ananasi is they really only have 2 breeds. Homid, born from a single human parent, or Arachnid, born from a spider parent. They don't have true metis. If a creature is born from 2 Ananasi parents, it is a different breed entirely, called a Atasaya. They're also known as the Hidden. They are killing machines. They have no human forms. They have voracious appetite. They know nothing of kindness and pity. And only Queen Ananasi knows what their purpose is in her grand scheme. Once they hatch, they devour any of their siblings, so the strongest survive. They're taken to the deep Umbra, where they're sheltered by powerful spider spirits, or even an elder Ananasi. They're allowed to mature, and powerful rituals, only known to a few select of the Damha, they're frozen in amber for the future. Whatever the queen herself, Ananasi, requires of them. And she's pretty much the only one these creatures communicate with. And everything else is hostile to them. There is speculation that perhaps the queen herself will use these as a final move in an elaborate game to usurp the Triad, and they'll be the chosen warriors against any of the minions in the greater universe. But again, who knows? There are menace in another group, though. We're going to talk about in a little future. The Kumo. They have a menace. We'll talk about the Kumo in a little bit. But they are very rare and horrible beings that eat the way out of their mother's body. So... menace bad for spider people, turns out. You know, just saying... here, there's a nice view, as we're talking, moving on here, to aspects of the Pithis form. That is a Pithis Ananasi. So, they don't possess tribes or auspices, something that others do. They do have 3 aspects, basically factions within each of those aspects. Each aspect is a balancing force of the Triad and kind of champions it. They approach tasks in different ways, so they're either serving the Weaver, the Wild, or the Worm, but they try to fulfill what they originally represented, not what they represent now. So representing the original vision of the Triad. The Triumvirate, as they're called. So, after Ananasi metamorphosis, they manifest physical change to denote their aspect. The markings manifest as a changes in pore pattern, especially on the face and torso, in Hamid forms, as an overt coloration or texture change in other forms. So it's basically, they've metamorphosized, they've got their first change, and then something changes in the way they appear to do this. Tenere are branded with spiderweb markings that radiate in circles, wedges. Hatar markings are sinuous and serpentine, and Kumotoi patterns are jagged like lightning bolts that zigzag over top of each other. So let's talk about these 3 aspects a little bit more, and each of those individual ones. And we'll do that right there. And we will talk about their divisions also, but we'll start with these now, because we divide up more, and I have to explain more before I explain all the divisions, because it's basically each of these 3 then has one of 3 kind of paths. That's a kind of 9x9 or 3x3 chart to kind of figure out what you're doing. I'll explain it. So Tenere are Weaver dedicated. They have the best control over their emotions, pay most attention to order and pattern. They want to restore the Weaver to the original aspect, not the mad, out-of-control creature that it's become. They value neatness in personal lives, order in their relationships, patterns in day-to-day activities. They're logical, calculating, precise, strive to maintain stability in the Great Web, and embody the Weaver in everything they do. The Hatar are the Worm Servants. They dedicated the original aspect of the worm, the destroyer worm, rather than the corruptor. They believe that the worm itself has been corrupted by its imprisonment by the Weaver, and that in order to fulfill the true place in the Triad, it must be freed and returned to its original role. They're living embodiment of the tenet that center cannot hold. They're unweavers of... They're the unweavers of the Ananasi. Their duty is to focus on breaking down which stands in the way of symmetry under the command of their queen. So this idea that everything eventually breaks down and then becomes created again, kind of, it's that balance between everything, that they're the kind of shifting around, that everything has to be kind of then remade. So it's creation, order, destruction, balanced. The Kumoti, the Wildborn, are creative, dynamic. They emulate the wild. Again, as it should be rather than it is. Subtle changes and manipulations. They don't want stagnation. They don't want entropy. They don't want things to stay the same. They don't want everything to break down. They want growth, development. They want flourishment. They can be more chaotic than calculating, but the idea for them really is that changes carries potentials for transitions in the right direction to achieve their goals. Now, let's talk factions. Oop. We'll stay on this one for this one. So, each of those aspects has overarching goals and duties, but within each of these groups, there are distinct roles that do exist. These are subdivisions known as factions. They're basically ensuring that every aspect, every part of the aspect's responsibility receives the proper attention. For each of these members of the Triumvirate, there are 3 factions, defined as the duties that Queen Ananasi has succinctly doled out. Your faction becomes clear during your period of umbral instructions. The faction, as a word, denounce the 3 roles and specific combinations of the 9 aspects. Basically, there's 9 combinations of aspect and role, and this factions helps determine them. So, we're talking about this here. So, Ananasi cannot change her aspect or faction. There is no right of renunciation for werespiders. It's a blessing and a curse that they are what they are from the beginning. From when they are created until they return to the Great Mother. Let's talk about these 3, because this will finish our 9x9 chart. This is very... I just thought about it. This is very alignment chart for D&D. If you've ever seen an alignment chart that's a 3x3 chart, this is a very alignment chart. Anyway, we start with Myrmidon. This is the warrior aspect. They engage in martial combat when necessary, guerrilla tactics that suits their queen needs. They understand the subtleties of diplomacy and the value of shock maneuvers, both. So they are the warriors. The Fisker are judges and mystics. They pour themselves into hidden knowledge, arcane magics, mysteries. They're the most likely to interact with other changing breeds, at least in trying to obtain more power or fulfill more of the Great Mother's goals. And the Wistra are the questioners. They look beyond how reality presently exists and ask not only why it's so, but how they could manipulate reality to better serve the Queen Mother's objectives. They also test the rest of the Damaha, either personally or as a whole group, basically to ensure that the factions and the groups don't weaken the plans and the web that the Great Mother has been putting about. They try to get rid of things like laziness, ignorance, incompetence, call the issues beforehand. So this combination of 2 gives us, it's a nice lady there, our Cabals. Yes, the Cabals. What the heck does this mean? These are what these are called. Again, a comparison to those that might know charts like this, like the alignment charts, where you have things where you go from one range to another range to each other, and they combine together for these things, and you can talk about each of them. It's the exact same way. So, when we talk about the Teneri, the Myrmidons are the Satians. The Warriors of the Weaver, they are understanding the universe's patterns, analyzing them, detailing them. The Visker of the Teneri are the Pilcare. They're shamans of the Weaver. They use powers to exert perfect control of their lives, bring precise order to the world around them. The Wistra of the Teneri are the Gadarin. They're counterspinners that challengers of order. They question the interconnectedness of things by amassing extensive collections of subjects. Basically, so we have those that are understanding the pattern, analyzing them, maintaining as orders, those that are using powers to produce perfect control, and those that are like, okay, where does order need to be corrected so it's the proper order? Where are things interconnected? Where are there mistakes that might have to be corrected or something like that? The questioners. For the Hatar, of course those under the original worm, the Giri, they're destroyers. They move silently, surgically from a target to a next. They're maintaining the balance of the original worm's purpose, destroying what needs to be destroyed. The Anomia, for the Viskar, for the Hatar, are balancers of the lost balance. What does that mean? They want to fulfill the worm's role as destroyers by manipulating mortals into doing their work for them. They see mortals as a great way of doing the destruction that needs to be done and manipulate them to do that. The Wistra of the Hatar are the Malum. They're the, questioners. They are important to understand the objectives, to question reality, to see where things could be made better, and to make sure everything's good. They disdain corruption, and they anguish in the pursuit of pure, unadulterated, undiluted destruction and entropy. That's the Mal. The Myrmidon for the Kumuti are the Kar. They manipulate the environment by working changes on the smallest level. So they work small levels to manipulate things up to larger. Viskara, the Kumotoi, are the Amari Alquid. They're sorcerers of chaos, creativity. They go by the worm's mandate for constant change, persistent motion, action. And of course, the Wistra of the Kumotoi are the Kaimos, counter dancers in the worm's name, in the wild's name. So they undercut and fight against minions of each triadic spirit as necessary to further their plans for the wild. So they fight against things as they need to. Let's talk about groups, because we've got some groups to talk about. Here is the Kumo, which we're going to talk about in a second here, but let's talk about the other groups that are in here too. And may I note, beyond these groups, there are individuals, Ananasi, that have, for whatever reason or another, have rejected the queen, Ananasa. They also may have not fallen to the worm or joined the Kumatai. So I'll say that. There are individuals who could have rejected the queen and still not fallen to some other groups and stuff like that. That's a thing that we have to talk about. But, so, the Maha are your normal Ananasi. They're the vast majority of them. They have their three aspects, their three factions, what we just talked about. That is their organization. Most Ananasi fall into those groups. We can start, though, with the Kumo, also called goblin spiders. They are the Asian branch of the Ananasi. Now, they are considered traitors, though, because they're thought to have aligned with the worm over their queen. The queen still has them serve the worm sometimes, but this one is rather than, the queen's goal for it actually go to the worm. They have their place in Anasa's web. there seem to be corrupting and killing her ultimate design, and have basically been tricked to following only the worm. They have no rage, not affected by silver. They blood to use gifts. They are vulnerable to weapons made of Hong Mu, a rare and fragrant variety of red rosewood. That's a important thing to say. So these are essentially all Hatar and no factions. That's an important part about it. And they have their Haman form, they have a Metis form, and an Arcos form. Anyway. Though they do have Metises. They're revered among the Kumo. Respect and stuff. They're born in Lilian form, eat their way out of the mother's belly. They are barren, and elders officially recognize Kumo breeding with Kumo. They discourage that, but elders do. But at the same time, they kind of turn the eye because the results are a creature they kind of like. So, again, the Arachnos, which is the born to spiders, are rarer than with Kumo than in the West. Comet is their main way of going through. So, they have three main families, basically aspected under the worm. The Blessings of Rati, dedicated to the worm, Defiler Worm. Children of Naru, dedicated to the Eater of Souls. And Marwa's Brood, dedicated to the Beast of War. But I can go a little bit more in depth than Kumo, but I think that's probably enough for you to have an idea about them. They are certainly a group that you would have in Shapeshifters of the East, the Hengei Yokai book. Would be a great place to look into them. But they do show up in both the Ananasi and Changing Breeds books, too. Anyway, there is also, as another group, the Antara. These also have chosen to serve the worm, but out of a desire to be free rather than being tricked. They each had an aspect, but no more. It's hard to differentiate an Antara from a Hatar, even for an Antara and Hatar themselves, because of this entire thing. So these are truly fall into the worm. So, like, as I said, the Kumo still kind of have a place in the web. Their idea is corrupting and killing her ultimate design. Again, it could be part of the entire web. So it's like the Kumo still have a place. The Antara do not. They refuse to be ensnared in Queen Anas's web, and they entreated to the worm for power to break free of the web. Anatara followed the worm to freedom, they believe. See, they believe Queen Ananasa has her own goals and not Gaia's, the reality's goals, and her following is not something that could be done. So, that's where they come from. Again, they're also known as breakers. The W20 Book of the Worm is a great place to look into them. They're solitary, sometimes work with others, Antara, or other Ananasi, but that's kind of like a situational kind of thing. Basically, breakers are very independent, and to follow another is strength of will, not to murder someone that's basically giving them orders. They would follow if they believe it's the best thing for their own goals. Yeah. So, breaking free has empowered the worm, but they don't really do anything for the worm, though, either. It's one of those weird things. The Antares serve their own whims. There's no manipulation, no control. They command their own destinies. Fight to the death before submitting to a master. Hence why I mentioned the murdering, you know. So, that's the thing. In freeing them, the worm may have created more of a problem than helped itself. You know, the core of an Ananasi is to weave and build control. It's their essence. They're children of the weaver. So the Antara will eventually seek to bind the worm. They've given them this power, freed them, empowered them. They do whatever they want. They're hedonists. They revel in emotional release. They have some kinship to Kumo. They're very interesting. Now, there are a couple more we can talk about. First off is the Kumatai. So, they've allowed themselves to be worshipped by humans. They don't serve the Triad. They don't serve the Queen. Their struggle with Damhan is trying to convert one to another rather than hostility. They're basically independents, heretics, self-proclaimed divinities. In local isolated areas, they're basically a place that they create spider cults. Areas like India, the Middle East, North Africa, the Americas very rarely, they kind of set these things up. They aren't initially violent in their convictions, like something like a Kumo. But again, the Ananasi would love to get them to come back to the service of an Anasa. So they're seen as misguided to each other. So they try to convince each other. Hey, one is like, hey, come back here, but hey, no, you should just, let people worship you. Don't forget about all that other crap. And finally, imaged here that we have here are the Padrone. Another splinter group of the Ananasi. They hunt down common Ananasi. That's the easiest way to describe them. They have a powerful form similar to Pithis, but it's horribly mutated. They hunt, kill, and eat other Ananasi. Whether it's some kind of disease, or some kind of menace thing, or something, no one really knows for sure. But it spreads like a disease, though. It's shortly after the War of Rage that they came into popular medium. Sorry, drinking a drink there. Basically, whatever their history, reason for coming into existence, hard to say. But they've turned against themselves, is the best way to say. They are still Ananasi, but they eat others. Drain the ichor. Kept them alive until they could empty them completely, and then cast them aside as rubbish. They have the four main forms, but they have a fifth form. One that has one goal, destroying of their other kind. The Padrone form. It's a lot like Pithis, as I said. It's a large spider that's on the prowl, horribly mutated in a kind of new shape. 8 legs of a spider, 2 vestigial legs used to disorient prey and keep them at a distance. It's not, again, similar to the Lillian, it's not really one form. It's like a form they use to lure their prey to their doom. It's very quicker than any normal Ananasi. It's believed that Padrone, the group, not the form, need the essence of other Ananasi to keep themselves alive, much as Ananasi feed on blood of others. So yeah. They are pleasant that way. It's felt that they have a strange sense that draws them to Ciliae, which is a Siley, a term used to describe an Ananasi haven, where they connect to the Umbra and Queen Ananasi. It's a den realm for them. So if I say Siley, that's what I mean. But maybe they have a way to sense Siley. Discovering these hidden refugees where Ananasi hide, and once they gain access to it, well, feed on the prey in their own home. Is it spiritual corruption? Is it something else? No one knows, but, yep, they are a thing that you as an Ananasi would have to deal with. You're welcome! I can do this one for this. It's a little bigger. So what does this represent? Well, this represents the history of Ananasi. So they are one of the oldest pharaohs, older than humans. Their ancient form, in the most ancient of times, was Pithis form. This is before they learned how to shapeshift. So, remember Pithis? It's a giant spider. That was their original form. It came about that there were other insect races during this time. The insect races were not created by Gaia, but the Weaver. That's an important thing to note. The insect races were supposed to be a gift to Gaia, similarly the Rokia was a gift to Gaia from the wild. They were still servants of chaos, in a way. It was some of this creation and stuff that led to the severing, the madness of the Weaver, and stuff like that. But the events of chaos and all this kind of stuff inspired Ananasi to create her progeny. So Ananasi, one of the main servants of the Weaver, created the Ananasi, who were all servants of the Weaver, but went with the Weaver to madness, to the severing. One didn't, but that one would be destroyed. So, that's not good. Basically, Anos is like, hey, kids, I know I've just created you, but I'd like some balance here. You know all these other pharaoh races, these insect races that are kind of hanging around that the Weaver, who we're all kind of originated from, came from? Yeah, they've kind of gone mad with a boss lady, which I don't like. I haven't gone mad. Get rid of them. And so the insect wars occurred. It was genocide in prehistory, where the Ananasi went against the insect races, the insect shapeshifters, who originally were there to protect Gaia, but went with their own one to madness. The insect races were waging war against the rest of creation to serve their creator, and honestly, as much as it sounds terrible, Ananasi basically fought with them. there weren't any other Fera to oppose them. So, the Ananasi were the main way to destroy them. Battles were swift, merciless. The insect race were even prepared to surrender, but they annihilated them on behalf of their queen. They rewove the spirits of insects in order to divide them from a union with flesh. And this is the time the Weaver was busy binding the worm. The destruction was noticed only when they were gone. This secret genocide is a terrible thing, but also, like, it's one of those things that has a very strange tone, because the insect races were going to try to destroy everything anyway. You committed genocide on something that was going to destroy everything. That's such a weird concept. They were very mentally like the Ananasi. It's said that they were. So there were bees, hornets, ants, termites, and locusts that all went away. There had been moths. Moths were the ones that defied the Weaver and were eliminated. So, yeah. The Weaver felt Ananasi had betrayed it because of the insect wars. And so as revenge, for being trapped by... And... So, as revenge for being trapped by the Weaver, the worm captured Queen Ananasi, forced the Ananasi to do work for it. Some refused and instead turned to the wild. The Ananasi eventually found out where she was trapped and tricked the Garu into cracking her prison. So, Ananasi was still trapped, but now could communicate with the Ananasi. And again, when she was captured, some stayed with the Weaver, some went to follow the worm, some went to follow the wild, because the worm basically forced some of them to work for them. So there was all this, like, balance between it, and that's when the queen herself ordered them to serve all three parts of the triad. Not as they are, as they were meant to be. So, insect wars, Weaver trapping other beings in madness, worm trapping their queen in revenge, tricking the Garu to basically making a crack of the pigeon enough to create it, and boom, there you go. Version of how the factions and stuff exist within the Ananasi became to be. They were a target during the War of the Rage, but survived very well, pretty much by pretending to be defeated. They're like, oh no, you've killed us all! Have you gone away? Okay. And after the War of Tears, which is another werewolf thing, the Yowie has begun hunting the Ananasi in Australia relentlessly. It's a creature in Australia that has been hunting them from around 1900. With the fall of the Bunyip, it's assumed that maybe that's related to that or something. The Garu tribe of original one of Australia. So, yep. The Bunyip are kind of extinct. Anyway, let's talk only a little bit. We'll stop by, because we're almost done here. We've gone through most of it. Yep, that's a spider lady drawing some blood from someone and being really sensual. This is the art you have to deal with when you're looking at Ananasi. This is tame. This is tame. Be careful if you're looking for art for this. Please, for these ones. There are male Ananasi. Someone draw a male, please. Somewhere. Please. I beg you. They don't have to all be sexy spider ladies. So, their gifts often help their spider-like abilities. Webs, venom, things like that. There is a lot of gifts that allow them to help fulfill their roles. Most are learned directly from Queen Ananasi. Mediating with her in the Sealy, which I talked about, Siley. So, there are some gifts not learned by her, but they're not many. Most are correct. And there are lists of gifts you can find online or on books, in books. They do share some rights with Ovid, especially the mystic rights. They also have a number of their own rights, talked during their time of umbral instruction, whispered to them by Queen Ananasi. There is one right that stands above all others in importance, however. And the right of spinning and the right of master's needs are the two big rights that are Ananasi general rights, you should know. Let's talk about their organization, because they sort of do have them, not really. So, Ananasi, they're pretty solitary, carrying out the will of their queen, and maintaining personal bonds with, whoever's in their nearby area kind of thing, Again, also carrying out a personal bond with their queen. Hey, Queen Ananasi! Hey, how's it going? Thank you for teaching me the gifts. How are things? How's the kids? Oh, wait, that's me. How's all the other kids? Did Jenny say how much... do you like Jenny more? Sorry, I'm going very silly there. But again, it's like they all have a personal connection with a higher spirit being trapped in some kind of umbral plane. Anyway, they're unaware of the connection between all the disparate parts of reality. The Great Web. They themselves and most others remain, they're basically aware of the Great Web, how reality connects together. But they still kind of remain aloof and above all that they see as lesser parts of the interwoven tapestry of reality, the Great Web itself, which is a kind of attitude I talked about earlier, the kind of like better than thou kind of attitude that they have over others. That's the same kind of way. At heart, they're manipulators of the threads of reality. They're manipulators of those threads rather than the threads themselves, is the best way to say it. They aren't the web of reality, they manipulate the webs of reality. So they only give the appearance of bonding with those around them. A very manipulative technique. And don't really become intimately connected with humanity, the Ovid, basically other changing breeds, or any even others of their own kind. They're not very intimate with others. When groups do occur, it's usually for a goal that's too large for any single one to do, or for mutual protection. They're these temporary clusters that disband once either the threat is gone or the task is complete. They work together as long as it's needed. There are those amongst the Ovid that claim that's the only way that they avoid falling into cannibalism that often happens in nature when spiders intrude on their territory. The Ananasi don't say anything to those allegations. Just ignore those. We're just going to ignore those. Spider Lady. So, there are laws of Ananasi. These laws are the most important things that the Ananasi have. Because Ananasi's will is very subtle, complex. She has overreaching goals. And her biggest goal, of course, is the most simple. Symmetry in the Great Web. She gives her children insane tasks to accomplish in order to get this symmetry. Restoring each member of the triad to sanity? and their original duties, that's kind of a lot of stuff to do. Those are powerful spirits, including the creator of your queen. It's like, you know, this being that kind of I came from, can you restore it to sanity? Thank you. So, to keep balance and focus, she has 9 laws, rules for actions. So, humans can defy a legal system. Garrow may debate tenets of litany. The Ananasi hold these laws at the core of their being. And they know that without them, success is not just unlikely, but impossible. So these laws are: 1. Obey the queen, Mother Queen in all things. 2. Defend your brethren from all who would do them harm. 3. Follow the aspect and faction that Ananasi chooses for you. 4. Understand the ways of the triad, both as they were and as they are. Know the difference. 5. Know your enemies. 6. Know the great web for what it is. 7. Know your place. 8. Keep your mouth shut. I love those. And 9. Worship none but Ananasi. Heck of a set of laws. So, the last thing to talk about is renown, because that is a big important part of the rank system in a lot of these changing breeds. Ananasi may gain renown in 3 categories, corresponding to each member of the triad. They do still try to follow all 3, no matter your faction, to gain a deeper understanding of the great web of existence. That's why they have these 3 that each match with one of the triad. So it's sort of like, I might be one faction where I'm specifically going and, you know, trying to do stuff for the original Wild, but I still have to understand Weaver and the Worm to understand existence. So cunning for the Worm, obedience for the Weaver, and wisdom for the Wild. Favor of the Queen is much more important than ranks, but ranks are apparent by subtle patterns in skin, discernible in all forms. Each faction has their distinct pattern and becomes more complex as you arrive in rank. So, rank is still there. Its favor is more important, but rank still holds something. So, there are some things we do want to talk about, just because, honestly, there have been some clarifications, erratas, over the long period of time that has existed, and, you know, I'm not going to go over every change that's happened. I will tell you, if you want to see best, W20 is the best place to see where a lot of conflicts are decided, where they are put together, and kind of a lot of information is finally put to rest. So, as of anything in W20 printings or versions of that, that is the final, if there's any kind of arguments or stuff like that. And that's the thing is, we start with, the first thing is, when we talk about original Werewolf, the Ananasi were more living vampires than anything. It's now, more beginning to W20, Werewolf 20th Anniversary, that the individual groups, the divisions, this walk away from vampirism has, like, you know, there's still a connection there, but it's different now. It's better? So, yeah, Ananasi do have powerful pheromones. You know, that's why they can have this kind of sex appeal. You know, find a good mate to have more, especially because Hamid is the easiest way to do things. you know, anything else I want to mention from these? I'm just taking a quick look at the change list, an online one, just to see if there's anything that I want to throw out there for you. You know, well, there's no distinctions, like, spider species, human ethnicity, it's usually matched, like, kind of where in the world you're from. Gotta be honest, like, that kind of thing. There's a lot of different types of spiders, so, again, both those things. Anyway, why don't we leave it here? Because honestly, there is plenty of stuff to speak about still. Plenty of information that I could go over. But I think I've done enough to give you enough information. To give you a general idea on the Ananasi, and pique, hopefully, your interest to dive deeper into learning about them. Because certainly, there is, as I said, a lot more information. I would definitely recommend checking out the W20 books, where they give the final things, and the Ananasi book from, I believe that would be probably their first edition or revised. I'd have to check which edition that book is. I can quickly look that up. The March 2000, it's from the 2000, so the original book was 2000. It was the 7th of Changing Breeds books that were released during that time period. So it is definitely, to a degree, out of date, but a lot of the base information is still there. So that Changing Breed book, or the specific Ananasi book, is a great place to start. Followed up by, you know, W20 information is probably a great place. The werespiders are just such an interesting group because they are very unique, very different. They aren't probably the best for player characters, because certainly, yeah, you could be an individual that's kind of rebelled against the Queen Mother. You know, as I said, I think that's the excuse for a lot of player characters. You know, in that groups area where I was talking about the different groups that there existed, the individuals that also rebel, that's kind of where a lot of player character Ananasi might want to come from. Because, yeah, maybe you're a little bit individualistic, but, you know, you've seen some kind of problem with the way that the order works in your society, quotations, and you've kind of gone off on your own. That might be a good excuse to hang out with others, to find some solace in that. And yeah, you might be a little, like, standoffish, individualistic, maybe not get those, like, be very hard to get a intimate relationship with. Doesn't mean you can't grow as a person and be individual. So, there's also Ananasi stories you could tell with a group coming together for a big reason. So it's not like you couldn't play them, but they are a challenge to play. Interesting. Because they are technically an arachnid form, related to the insect forms, but all descending from the Weaver. But there is no other like them that exists. There's mammals, birds, reptiles, fish that have fairer breeds, mostly mammals nowadays. But they either have existed or do exist. Unique creatures that are very different types. They're all still vertebrate type things in comparison to with an exoskeleton. Very alien in comparison, and with an interesting society, with a very deep breakdown and very deep important roles, and this goal which is pretty insane but important to them, makes them such an interesting group to look at and to certainly talk about. And as I said, there are stories to be told there. But up to you if you want to dive into the difficulty of those stories, or maybe just use these in some way in part of your game. Certainly either way, I would recommend, you know, learning more. There is a lot to dive into their rituals, into their ways of doing things, what their rite of becoming an adult, of metamorphosis, these things like that, where there's deep rules and ways of things that happen, and stories to be told there, and experiences and information, and just a lot. But I could kind of gush on about this, but I think it's best just to kind of leave this here, because I feel like this is a great place to leave it. So I thank everyone who joined me today. I stream these every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Tuesday and Thursday around 1 p.m., Saturdays at 11 a.m. If you want to check out any of my time I talk about tabletop, I talk about World of Darkness stuff like this, I talk about Pathfinder stuff, and I talk about other role-playing game systems. My YouTube channel, which most of you will probably be seeing this on, is where all these go up on eventually, usually a day or two after. Please follow Twitch, subscribe YouTube, like, comment, throw yourself up for some comments and stuff on Twitch. A lot of things you can do to show support for me. I have a Discord and Twitter, which are places you can see what I'm doing, occasional brain farts of information. There are other supporting ways, but up to you what you want to dive deep into, things like the Patreon, which has to be updated, and subscribing on Twitch and all that kind of stuff, if you want to support monetarily. But whatever you want, if you're just here for the information, just give a subscription. It's good enough. Anyway, I will leave it here then. I thank you all. I thank you all for joining me, and I say to all of you out there, until the next time we speak, until the next time I return to the world of darkness, I bid all of you a wonderful farewell.